Thank you, Jennifer. Glad everyone came here today. So today we're going to have a conversation about accessory dwelling units, or ADUs. First, we're going to give just a very brief overview. We're going to talk about what are ADUs, the recent changes to state laws that affect ADUs, how Westford has reacted to those changes, and what does this mean for you folks going forward. So most of the time here will actually be dedicated to any questions you might have. We'll do our very best to try to answer them after the quick overview. If there are questions that we can't answer, we'll certainly try to make an effort afterwards, and we can share that information as well. So today, as Jennifer mentioned, we have a panel here to try to help us through this conversation. We do have Ray Dick from Health Department, Eric Tardif, Building Commissioner, and Joe Jenowitz, our Town Planner. And first, I'm going to turn it over to Joe to just give a brief introduction about what is an ADU and the recent changes to state law.
Thanks, Jeff. So an ADU, or accessory dwelling unit, is a small self-contained living space on the same property as the larger principal home. ADUs will typically have a separate entrance and can either be in the existing home. Sometimes you see this come forth through as an addition. Sometimes you see some previously unfinished space, say in a basement, get converted to like a basement apartment. Or they can be detached, and sometimes that happens through a garage renovation into living space. Well, maybe now people can hear me a little bit better. Or you could see like an old barn or old carriage house renovated, becoming an in-law apartment as well. So there were some recent changes to state law regarding ADUs that would allow folks to be able to build them by right, meaning no special permissions from, say, a land use board under certain circumstances. So we'll go over that really quickly here. And we'll go over, quickly why the state was looking to do this. So housing affordability has been a challenge across the country, including the Commonwealth, which has seen construction costs and thus housing prices rise to historic, but I think what people would really determine to be unsustainable levels. Many cities and towns have had ADU regulations in the past, but they've been rather inconsistent between community to community. Sometimes some cities or towns are more onerous than others. So the state, through what's called the Affordable Homes Act, that was basically their housing bill in August of 2024, they passed that, looking for efforts to generate more housing throughout the Commonwealth at different price points to meet growing demand for housing throughout the state. Part of that included some provisions for ADUs. Again, those took effect in February of 2025. And again, this allows for ADUs to be built by right under certain circumstances within single-family zoning districts. So we'll go over a couple terms quickly, because some of them might not be quite intuitive when you hear them. So single-family zoning districts, that includes areas of a town where single-family homes are allowed by right or by special permit. So that can vary widely from cities or towns depending on how they utilize their zoning and within their jurisdiction, depending on where they're looking for residential development, commercial development, or a mix of both. In Westford, the vast majority of the town is zoned residentially, so provisions passed in the Affordable Homes Act for ADUs can affect a good amount of town. There are a few requirements to qualify as what the state calls a protected use ADU. So again, it has to have a separate entrance from the principal dwelling. Can't be larger than 900 square feet or 50% of the gross floor area of the principal dwelling. So you have to use a little bit of math sometimes, and I'll give an example quickly. So if you have a 1,500 square foot home, the largest protected use ADU you could have by right is 750 square feet. If you had a home that was 3,000 square feet, a larger home, still the maximum allowed for a protected use ADU is 900 square feet. So it's whichever is smaller. Towns can also have some additional what's called reasonable dimensional standards. So again, what is considered reasonable? So you would have things that otherwise would apply to the principal dwelling or accessory structures, but you can't be more restrictive than what's allowed for those. So another example, if a home is required to be at least 50 feet from the front yard property line, you can't have something more onerous than that for the accessory dwelling unit. Just for an example there. So there are some standards like that you can have. There are other ones that are what are considered prohibited regulations or requirements. Some things like that could be requiring that they have to be owner occupied, for instance. Could be excessive parking restrictions. You can't have things that are too excessive there. So that's just a very quick, brief background. At the state level, I'll turn it over to Jeff now to talk about what Westford has done in reaction to some of these state changes.
Thanks, Joe. So at the end of January 2025, the state finalized new regulations concerning accessory dwelling units, and then with a lot of input from the Planning Board, the Zoning Board of Appeals, who typically is the board that grants the special permits for ADUs, and technical assistance from NIMCOG, our regional planning agency, we developed a zoning proposal for consideration at the October 2025 special town meeting. And so that zoning amendment, Article 4, I believe, it was approved by town meeting. It is subject to review still by the Attorney General's office. We expect to have benefit of their review within about 1 month from today. So at the end result, we really have two main categories of accessory dwelling units. We have the protected use ADU, that's under state law that Joe talked about. And then we still have what we call now a local ADU, and that's with benefit of a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. That's under our local zoning bylaw. So what I'll say is, even with protected use ADUs, there's no such thing as a guarantee, and we'll go into this more later. The only guarantee under the law is that zoning cannot prohibit the protected use ADU. So under zoning, we can't say no, but even a protected use ADU would still have to meet, say zoning dimensional setback requirements. They would have to comply with building code. They would have to comply with Title V, the state environmental code, regarding septic systems. And if work is being proposed within a buffer zone to, say, wetland resource areas, they still have to go through all of those permissions, that permitting process. But zoning can't say no to the protected use. With the local accessory dwelling units, our zoning does allow for up to 1,250 square feet. Instead of the 900 or 50% of the gross floor area. It does require, as I mentioned, a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. That is a public hearing process, so there is some time and expense going through that process. The Zoning Board does have the discretion to say no to a local ADU, and the process is usually a minimum of about 3 months. You have to submit about a month in advance. If everything goes well at that first hearing and they close it, we still have time to issue a decision on behalf of the board. There is a permit, there is an appeal period, and then the decision would have to be recorded at the Registry of Deeds to be effective. So, and if the hearing takes more than one session, that's going to extend that zoning process by at least another month. And that's in addition to any other permitting processes, which I know others will talk about later. So, next, I'm going to turn it over to Ray Dick, actually, to talk a little bit about what the health department might. The takeaway here is, if you're even thinking about an ADU, whether protected or local, go to the health department early and often, because that's a very important part of the puzzle. So, Ray?
Hi, good morning. Thank you for coming this morning. My name is Ray Dick. I'm the health director with the Westford Health Department. ADUs, are in-law apartments, if you will, are very popular here in the community. I think my biggest piece of advice is anyone that is thinking about putting on an accessory dwelling unit in this case, I would certainly think about your timeline. Feel free to make an appointment with any one of our offices because we're all out in the field during the day when people come to the counter. I always feel bad when someone has a bunch of questions and there's not someone there always to answer all their questions. So I would say my advice is think about your timeline, get ahead of it, come visit all of us, find out what you need, put that all together. A lot of times people go home and they say, oh, I forgot to ask these questions. You can always email, call us, come by anytime. That happens with building permits and additions all the time. I will say the health department oversees your private septic system, Title V regulations. It's not what we allow, it's what the state allows. So today we are handing out, this is the guidance from the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, Mass DEP. They oversee Title V regulations here for the state of Massachusetts, where our department enforces those. So we do have some guidance here in accessory dwellings, as well as a Q&A. These come directly from the state. And again, I would just say, think about your timeline. Generally, as you heard from Jeff, there's a process that you need to go through that can take some time. You don't want to wait till the end and then come over to the health department and start your septic system. You want to kind of align them all together, and we can certainly help you do that. I will say every situation is a little different with septic systems. Some of the main questions we get is, what do I need to do? Do I need a multi-compartment septic tank? You do. You need a multi-compartment septic tank, or you need what's called a tank in series, which is your existing tank and a new tank in series of that. So those are some of the main questions we get. Can I put a separate system on my property in addition to what I have now? Yes, you can. We do need to look at the property, if you have an on-site well, what kind of septic system you want to put in. So there's a lot of different variables, and again, we can help you through that process. And we're here to answer any questions you might have. Building?
Okay. My name is Eric Tatter from the Building Commissioner. I'm just going to speak briefly about gross floor area. With both of these guys have mentioned gross floor area. So basically, gross floor area is the sum of areas in all stories of the principal dwelling with code-compliant ceiling height, including basements, lofts, and intermediate floor tiers, measured from the interior faces of the exterior walls or from the center line of walls separating buildings or dwelling units, but excluding crawl spaces, garage parking areas, attics, enclosed porches, and similar spaces. With that being said, I mean, there's not a lot. I mean, everything is already spoken about, 760 CMR 71, which is the protected ADU. These gentlemen already brought it up.
If you could just briefly, state your name, that would be great.
Diane Wood. A quick question, did I miss something? The two factors that may determine whether you go protected ADU or local would be the size and your timeline. Is that an accurate description? Because the timeline would complicate, and it appears as though it's a lot longer, but it's more complicated than going protected use.
Yes, so I'll start, and if I get anything wrong, my comrades will jump right in. So, for a local ADU, it does have a lengthier permit process because it has an extra permitting process with the Zoning Board of Appeals. Like I said, that'll probably extend that overall process at least 3 months minimum. What I will say, though, you can have just one protected use ADU on a single lot, and you can only have one local ADU on a single lot. If, say, you have a principal dwelling and there's no ADU yet, and you apply for a special permit for a local ADU, if the local ADU could qualify as a protected use ADU, the zoning board, I don't believe, can grant it. So in other words, you have to use the protected use ADU card first before going to, if an ADU qualifies as a protected use, I don't believe they can grant a special permit if you don't already have a protected use ADU. I don't know if that makes sense, if I got that right.
Think about that one. Thank you.
All right, so, any corrections?
I'm Steve Hoffman. Three-part question, and you can only have one ADU per single-family lot?
You can only have one protected use, and you potentially could have one local. So it is theoretically possible to have one of each on a single lot.
Second question, two-part question. You can have a modular unit installed, put in. If you had two of those put in, would you need two individual septic tanks because they're too far away from the house to connect to the existing house septic tank?
Yes. So if you have an ADU that is separate from the house, they would need their own septic tank, multi-compartment tank, okay, here in Westford. If it turns out, depending on how big the property is, or how close it is to the house, it could certainly tie into the existing septic
My
system.
question was, though, if you had two ADUs, could you have one septic tank for both?
Yes, you could,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you. And there's no restrictions on modular units, and they can be used for rental, right?
It's a Jeff question.
So, rental is permissible so long as it is not short-term rental. So we still prohibit short-term rentals here in town
Or
with
short-term?
short-term rentals. So basically 28 days or less would be considered short-term. That's high level.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Arnie Price. So an ADU may or may not have a separate address?
That is correct. So as of right now, going forward, I believe they will all have a separate address.
Yes, they definitely need a separate address. If it's an attached ADU, it would be considered A. So let's say you lived at 24, let's say Main Street, it would be 24A. If it was a detached, it would be 24D.
So an ADU that's built, an in-law apartment, so to speak, that's built over a garage, an existing garage,
Yes,
that would also have a separate address?
that would have a separate address. That would be, it's where it's detached from the principal dwelling, that would be a D, an address with D.
What if the garage is attached?
Then it would be an accessory, it would be A. It'd be 24A.
Are there ADUs in town now that do not have a separate address?
No, they shouldn't be. We were very, very short-staffed, and I've only been here for 1 year.
I get it.
And I was learning the process. 21 years as an inspector, I never had to issue addresses, so it was a whole new learning curve for me. I think I've captured them all. But we've got approximately right now at this point 20 to 25 ADUs that we're permitted.
So this is just kind of looking forward, so an ADU would have a separate address with all the discussion about trash pickup, which probably doesn't involve any of you guys. They would be, I guess if they had a separate address, they would have a separate trash barrel under what the proposed pay-as-you-throw program is.
So as of right now, the intent is that if you have a separate address and the ADU is in the assessor's database, so to speak, they would be entitled to a separate barrel as of this point in time, unless different direction is provided from the select board.
And it's required by the state sanitary code.
Okay.
They have their own barrel.
No comment on that. So our local ADU is more generous than a protected ADU. We passed that at town meeting 1250.
We did.
We did. And they would still be able to, just for the one extra trash barrel, that we're trying to reduce tonnage for.
Unless there's different direction provided from the select board, yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hi, Karen Hudson. I have a 3-bedroom ranch with a 3-bedroom septic system, just installed about 8 years ago. If I finished my basement, do I go to a 4-bedroom now? And how does that work? Because I have a 3-bedroom septic system, 1,500-gallon tank, but I'm adding a 4th bedroom.
So if you're adding a 4th bedroom, you need a septic design. Are you looking to go through the ADU process or, oh, okay. So the ADU process, if you're adding another bedroom onto the property, you would still need to meet Title V regulations, the septic system, so you would need a leach field that's big enough to accommodate that 4th bedroom. Or you could potentially put on a second system just to accommodate that bedroom, depending on, if it's attached or not.
Ray, can I do a quick follow-up?
Sure.
So there's a certain, I believe, window of time where there were local Board of Health regulations where you had a different design flow, maybe 150 gallons per day instead of 110 gallons per day. So this is why we're saying, if you're even thinking about an ADU, some of the answers will be property specific, because it is possible to have a 3-bedroom septic system that was designed and approved when there was a higher design flow per bedroom. And now that the health department or the Board of Health reduced it to match Title V, it is possible that you could have a 4-bedroom design flow that could still fit with the existing 3-bedroom, which is now over-designed for the present day. I don't know if that made it more complicated, but I'm just saying you really need to, for each specific property, have a conversation with the health department, because it is that complicated.
It is.
Okay.
Hi, Christy Bates. I'm wondering, how is a separate ADU assessed for taxes? Do you get a separate bill if you have a separate ADU?
I would defer to Will Nazer, our chief assessor.
Okay.
Someone here may know the answer to that, but I don't want to give bad information.
So I'm on the Affordable Housing Trust, and one thing I noticed recently is there's a new, within the past, 2 years, the state has a new tax assessment that not only for ADUs, but for affordable housing, that you could get a tax relief if you have that unit designated as affordable. Is that something that, I'm guessing no, but have we looked at, have we considered, would it be feasible to do for an ADU?
We can certainly arrange a conversation with our assessing department, so we'll make a note of that, and we'll have that conversation.
Thank you. And a follow-up question, if I may, just, we talk about timeline, and I'll speak about me specifically, but I bet for a lot of other people who've never gone through the building permit, through the whole process. And you've talked a little bit about timeline, about go to the health department. Is that where you'd start? Let's say, I want to build an ADU. Where do I start? And if I could see a timeline about the health department first, do I contract a builder? Do I go to, who do I look to get guidance on, will this fit on my land? I don't know where to start, and I'd love to see a very specific timeline about what to do.
So I'll start. I guess I would encourage anyone thinking about an ADU to come to the second floor of Town Hall, and you have the Land Use Management Department that has building, conservation, planning, and zoning, and directly across from us is the Health Department. I think those are both good places to start, and as Ray mentioned, I would try to arrange for an appointment. So one, we can pull information specific about your property in advance, so we can be in as good a position to try to answer your questions, but I would start there, because whether or not you have a contractor, they're still going to need that same initial information, see what is even, feasible. There could be some early deal breakers, just from Title V, depending, say, if your lot is in a nitrogen-sensitive area and how many bedrooms you have. So I would start arranging an appointment, second floor Town Hall. I think that's a good place to start. Eric, do you have any?
What I advise everybody, if it's an addition or if it's a detached and it's being built, is to first start with the Board of Health and Conservation to see if it's even feasible to have it done. And then if if they get the green light there, then you would need a certified plot plan. That would be the first 3 steps. Then apply, have the plans drawn up and then apply for a building permit.
What does a certified plot plan mean?
A certified plot plan is just a boundary line survey, just showing that you meet zoning.
How does one do that?
They would hire a land surveyor.
How do you do that?
Just either go online or talk to, other people and.
Yeah. So one, Eric is absolutely correct, but what I would recommend, getting a professional land surveyor, anyone who's reached out to some at all recently, they could have a lengthy wait. So I would reach out to multiple, but one of the good things to check is, who last prepared, if there was a plan for your property or your neighbor's property. If someone's recently done work in the area, I would try to see if any professional firms have already sort of on boundary in your area. Like if your neighbor put on an addition recently, you might want to see who they use and try to, if you reach out to 3 firms, you might want to include them. You might want to take a look at who prepared your original subdivision plan. You know, some of those firms are still active and around and currently do work in town. So if you reach out again to the land use and/or building health department, that's one of the things we could have in the conversation. Like, if you feel like you might want to explore going forward, we can have all that information for you, and, you know, it might give you another option or maybe even a better price. So.
Thank you. Do you have recommended, since I have the time, do you have recommended land saver surveyors?
No, we are not allowed to recommend any of those professionals, but what we can do is note, like, say, from the building file, maybe someone did a prior plot plan for even your property before you even had it, or maybe someone did work right next door, you know, or we know there was a project recently done in that area. You know, we're not recommending anyone, we can simply point out factually who has recently done work in that area, and that might be a good place to start.
And do you have average costs of all of these things that have to take place to put an ADU together, and then I'll hand it back to Benny?
Not going to go there because with boundary, as Eric mentioned, no two lots are necessarily the same. Sometimes it's straightforward and sometimes it's not, so I'm not going to speak about price. Anything you want to add? Okay, we got,
I
yeah.
don't need that microphone, believe me. Hi, Jeff, nice to see you
Nice to
guys.
see you.
Always, thank you for being here. So how recent does that plot plan have to be? There you go, guys.
It would have to be job and site specific. It would have to be for that job. Because the survey is the property of the land surveyor. And if you did draw on that, you would be violating, their constitutional rights.
Sorry, I don't think I understand the response. So we got a plot, we surveyed probably 5 years ago on our property, laid out the plot plan. Is that sufficient enough, or is it that we have to resurvey?
And you would have to resurvey. It would have to, your ADU, if it was an addition or a new ADU, it would have to be plotted on the plot plan by whoever is stamping.
Thank you.
So one thing to think about that's not obvious, you may say, you know, we haven't made any changes to our house in, say, 12 years, but things could happen, like easements could happen, there could be takings of some kind, and so those are things that are important to note that you don't run into foul down the road. But the commissioner does have some discretion, but as he mentioned, if you're proposing an addition or new construction, something new, he basically always looks for that updated plot plan.
Hi, thank you very much for doing this. My name's June McMorrow, and I live on Kings Pine Road. I have a couple of questions. So back in the day, when I was growing up, something like this was specifically for like a grandmother apartment.
Yep.
It sounds to me like I could potentially do this as purely an income-producing venture. Does the person does somebody who's living in the unit have to be related to me through blood or marriage?
So for the protected use ADU, there is no such requirement. You could consider it purely for financial reasons. And so with the zoning board for a local ADU, correct me if I'm wrong, they do have more discretion. I believe they could require that the owner live in either the principal or ADU for at least 6 months of the year. Is that right? Okay.
Okay, and I just have one other question. Excuse me. I believe I heard you say that if you had adequate square footage on your lot, you could potentially do a local and a protected. Did I hear that correctly?
It is theoretically possible.
Okay.
I would suspect there's probably not a lot of existing lots that lend themselves well to that opportunity. With Title V, a lot of lots were typically created with a minimum lot area and minimum frontage. I mean, obviously there are going to be exceptions. So it is possible, but again, they would need that discretionary special permit relief from the zoning board to do that.
Okay, so like potentially, if I were to be permitted a local and a protected, that would give me up to, with the 2 units, I could have up to 2,200 square feet, potentially. That is the math. My house is only 1,860 square feet, but I'm in the Kings Pine neighborhood on what my husband refers to as a builder's lot,
Yep.
which is how Hicks originally built
Yep.
that neighborhood. So I think it's 0.96 acres. So I probably have the square footage there. I could potentially do it. However, I might be held up with the Conservation Commission because that's all wet down there, off the back, down below Boston Road. So I may not be able to do it because of the conservation requirements. I believe that's probably correct.
And I do think the zoning board would review those proposals now, keeping in mind the possibility of, you know, a protected use ADU as well. I can't speak for them, but I'm sure they're going to look at all ADU applications from a different lens going forward, so.
I could make a lot of money renting out both of those apartments. Yeah, a 1,250 square foot unit, that could be 3 bedrooms easily, right? So could a 950 square unit. That would be a lot of rental income. Okay, just wondering, thank you.
Yep.
Make one comment. One comment though on how did you calculate your gross floor area? Is it conditioned space?
I added the 1,250 and the 950, isn't it?
No, I mean, because you do gotta remember, it's any area in the house, the principal dwelling, that has code compliant ceiling height. So even if you have an unfinished basement and it has code compliant ceiling height in the principal dwelling, that will count towards your gross floor area.
Well, I don't understand, what is ceiling height? What is that?
Ceiling height in.
Oh, ceiling height, I couldn't
Yes, ceiling height. Like
Excuse me.
on a first or second floor, it's 7 feet, attic, 7 feet. In a basement, it would be 6'8", and then 6'4" to any beams, girders, any projections.
I think that the main floor of the house and the second floor add up to I think it's 1,868 square feet. I don't think I'm including the basement at all.
You may want to measure the basement, and again,
So you're saying I could get an even bigger? than
you could achieve that 900 square feet
Okay.
for a protected ADU.
Okay, all right, well, thank you.
Okay.
Hi, Kathy Cunningham. I have a question along the same lines. I just want to be clear when you're talking about the basement. So what you just explained, does that pertain to both the protected and the local permitted? You count the space the same way is what I'm saying.
The gross floor area.
Well, it would be included in the protected ADU. I would have to see the bylaw. I haven't seen the full bylaw of the local at this point on how to calculate gross floor area. Can you make a comment on that, Joe or Jeff?
We're looking it up.
He never leaves home without a zoning bylaw.
Okay.
Okay, so gross floor area, the sum of the gross horizontal areas of the several floors of the building and its accessory buildings on the same lot, measured from the exterior faces of the walls. It does not include cellars, unenclosed porches, or attics not used for human occupancy. So it would be 2 different calculations.
Did we update that?
Can you explain that again? I'm sorry, 2 different calculations.
So if you were to put a protected ADU, you would calculate it under 760 CMR 71. If you were to put a local, it would be calculated under our definitions in our bylaw. Does that make sense?
It does, but it's really confusing.
We didn't start it.
No, I know.
Now, I'm the enforcer, not the policy maker, okay?
Heather Fitzpatrick for your next question. Could you just clarify one thing? You said that the owner may be required to live there for 6 months or is required to live there for 6 months?
So it doesn't apply for protected use ADUs. This would be for local accessory dwelling units. I believe, even with our amendment, I believe the zoning board could require that.
Could, so,
We're looking that up right now. So I think we're going to have to clarify that. It might be within their discretion, but it might not be an outright requirement. So we will get you a firm answer on that.
so then also following up on it, the ADU or the protected ADU, they can be rented. Can they be sold?
So through zoning, we cannot control the form of ownership, so it is possible. If someone wanted to, say, create a condominium for the principal and accessory dwelling unit, that is theoretically possible. They can do that. We can't prevent that through our local zoning.
Okay. So then following on the tax with the separate billing, how would the stormwater work with that? Would that be separate billing? And stormwater, I believe, is capped. So if you have above a certain level, you don't have an increased bill. Would stormwater be reevaluated for that? Because you could potentially be adding impervious surface.
I would joyfully defer that to different departments, but that is a good question, and I will let them know what the implications are ask them the implications for stormwater utility, so.
Okay, my last one is there any limit on number of people that can move into these units? I know there's a limit on the square footage, but.
Yes. Yes, there is. So in the state sanitary code, the housing code, for the state of Massachusetts, there are square footage requirements per bedroom for space, which is 70 square feet per person.
So if you have a 700 square foot, you could put 10 people there?
Technically, yes.
I don't know, it might be staying your way.
Donna DeGiovanni. I had a question about, I understand the septics and you may need a separate septic system based on what your capacity is. What about well? And I know there's a distance between septic and wells. What about town properties with private wells? Can a separate unit be tied into the same well, or do you have to drill a new one?
So you could potentially ask for a variance and tie into the same well. Again, it doesn't matter if it's attached or not. You could ask for a variance for a shared well. Certainly, we'd also look in the potential of tying into town water if that's available in the street. But there are Title V setbacks, as you mentioned, and then requirements would automatically make the property nitrogen sensitive. So there are additional things that would come with the private drinking water well on site.
Yeah, Bob Jeffries. If I own a building that qualifies as an ADU now, do I go get a special permit to build the main house that would support it?
Can you further describe the situation? Can you just restate that, please?
Okay, the existing house on the lot qualifies as as a local ADU in all ways. Square footage.
Oh, so you're saying.
System, everything is there.
So you're saying dimensionally, if your existing dwelling fits in the box of either a protected use ADU or even potentially under a local ADU, and you construct, say, a principal dwelling where that would then it'd go from a principal to an accessory, right?
Yeah, then, that's right.
Yeah,
So the
okay.
The existing building would change status from being.
Yep, that is possible, yes.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
So thank you for doing this. My name's Michael Leary. I have a follow-up kind of well question. So I have town water, but have a well that does irrigation. So if I had to add a separate septic system, would I have to shut that well off if it didn't meet the setback and cap it if it's not used for consumption?
Potentially, yes. Yes, you would want to do that, just because there are requirements both for a private drinking water well and an irrigation well, both through Title V and locally. So you would want to, there is a process that you have to go through to abandon that well and have it capped, if that would, and again, we look at all the options. Can you tie into town water, that kind of thing. But yes, if that's something that pertains to the septic system, in the case of the ADU, that's something we would certainly look at.
Well, I already have tap water, so we'll just,
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that piece. Yes, so we would certainly look at the irrigation well, again, in the setbacks to where you want to put the ADU, and then in comparison to your septic system.
thank you.
You're welcome.
I just have some additional information. I think Heather's question about owner occupancy for the local ADU. So say the owner did live in either the primary or accessory dwelling unit, and say they moved out. So there's a 90-day window after they move out when they do not use the property as their legal residence. So they would have to come back to the zoning board, and then the zoning board would have discretion up to including termination of the special permit. So if they thought it was important enough that it be owner occupied, as our bylaw is written, hopefully soon to be approved by the AG, they could consider termination of the special permit. But there is that sort of 3-month process where they come in when they're no longer using it as their legal residence. Okay?
Ken Mehar, excuse me. You mentioned the nitrogen zone. Could you explain that a little bit in detail? And is that part of getting a ADU that you would need to, if you need it?
So what?
Because I know the rules have changed.
So I'll start and then I'll turn over to Ray to fix everything. So there are some parts of town that are deemed environmentally more sensitive, and so for some areas there's a limitation on the amount, say they're nitrogen sensitive areas, there's a limitation on how many, say, bedrooms you can have on a lot. And so there may be a requirement that you need, say, 10,000 square feet per bedroom. So depending on the size of your lot, you might be capped at the number of bedrooms you can have just based on your lot area if you're in one of those sensitive areas. So even if you could fit a septic system practically, there could be that limitation on the number of bedrooms. And so that's why, again, go to health department early and often, because it can be one of the most complicated parts to the whole ADU puzzle.
And on that, if you don't have enough land, it's my understanding you can buy it
Correct.
someplace else.
Correct.
A nitrogen sensitive easement of sorts, so. Yep, no?
Yeah.
Sorry, Christy again. Thank you. One, can a mobile home be considered a detached ADU?
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Well,
Yep. Yeah.
If it met all requirements of building code, I'd feel more comfortable on getting back to you on that one, to be honest. Okay, I can get the information from Jeff and I'll send you an email. Did you want to?
no.
Hi, my name's Ellen Apico, 91 Chamberlain Road. In my situation, I'd be considering an ADU for an elderly parent or an adult child that's struggling to find affordable housing, and the likelihood would be putting a room or apartment over our garage. So I guess my question is, one of the things you say is you have to have a dedicated parking spot. Would my existing driveway be the dedicated parking spot?
So the zoning board has if it goes to zoning board, they can require at least a designated parking space. It doesn't mean you have to make a new space. You just have to show that you have adequate capacity. So if you have enough parking now for that added ADU, then that's not a problem. They're not saying you have to construct a new one. Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's right.
So I don't have to change my driveway and create a special spot? No.
Nope, as long as you satisfy the parking requirements, yes.
And my septic system, I have a 3-bedroom, 2-story house with a septic system that is for a 4-bedroom. So I'm just wondering, besides making sure I meet whatever standards are necessary, I guess, is that gonna be a problem?
If you have a 4-bedroom septic system now, and, excuse me, you have a 3-bedroom, utilizing 3 of the bedrooms, correct? And you have a 4-bedroom septic system, you're in good shape for adding 1 additional bedroom for an ADU. However, there are additional requirements, meaning the multi-compartment tank or tank in series. And what that involves is you would need to hire a civil engineer. The health department does have a list of civil engineers that work in the state of Massachusetts. And you would have them design that for you. There is a timeline to, plans being drawn up, our department approving them, and those would have to be approved before our department would sign off on the building permit. So I would definitely suggest coming to us ahead, and we're happy to, pull your file. I think it's important for residents to know that there is a septic file and a building file for every house here in the town. Whether there's material in it or not is a different story. But we would pull all that information ahead of time and meet with you and talk about any questions you had.
Thank you. One other question is, in the presentation, it says you have to have a separate outside entry. So would you still be able to have access through your existing dwelling?
Yes, you could. What it tells us under 760 CMR 71, maintains a separate entrance either directly from the outside or through an entry hall or corridor shared with the principal dwelling, sufficient to meet the requirements of the building code.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, now,
And
were
thanks
you...
for doing this.
Oh, no problem. Were you looking at putting permanent provisions for cooking in that space above the garage?
We haven't got that far. It would be a different situation for a 94-year-old mom than with an adult child. So I'm more in the exploratory.
Yes, because if you weren't putting permanent provisions for cooking, then it would not be considered an ADU.
Okay, that's
Okay.
an important thing to know. Thank you.
Can you just clarify the parking, because I thought that if it was protected, so under 900 square feet, you wouldn't need additional parking.
So I believe we can't require more than 1 parking space.
For protected use.
For protected use. And there is something in the law that says we can't require if it's within, a half mile of a transit station. So no part of Westford currently that applies to, but we actually had to keep that language in case sometime in the future there is a transit station within a half mile of Westford. So I don't know if that made it worse. From a practical standpoint, we can require 1 parking space for even a protected use ADU, but we cannot require more than 1. And if a transit station happens to get plunked down right next to Westford or in Westford within a half mile of that, we can't even require 1 parking space. But practically speaking, we can require 1.
Just one other question as a follow-up. Could you define how much of a kitchen you would need in that situation to qualify for an ADU?
It would have to have permanent provisions for cooking, a stove.
I do want to point out as a public service announcement, sometimes folks come in and they say, oh, we're not going to put in an oven and it's just, extra space, which is fine and you're entitled to do that. But please make sure that if you are going to put in cooking facilities later, that you try to get the the associated permitting with that, because if you ever go to sell or something down the road and and it's not the right, you want to protect yourself as well, and just be mindful of that. Like, simply by putting in an appliance where there wasn't one before could now turn it into an ADU situation. So you just want to make sure you protect yourselves and get benefit of proper permitting, right?
Yeah, for the most part. But there is case law, Ernie Bach Jr. on Martha's Vineyard, I think it was, whereas you can put more than one kitchen in a home. But it's basically a case-by-case basis. Welcome to my world.
So for an ADU, if someone put a 1,250 square foot ADU on their property, you only have to require one additional parking spot? Did I get that right?
So for a local ADU, I believe they just have to, the zoning board has discretion to just make sure there's adequate parking.
Yeah, for a local ADU, the zoning board can require at least one spot. But for a protected use ADU, they cannot require more than one spot.
Well, they're not, yeah. Yeah, they're probably not involved in a protected use ADU unless that protected use ADU needs some other relief, like
So
maybe
where
they.
the 1,250 square foot ADU kicks in, that's under,
That's a local ADU because it's more than 900 square feet.
yeah. So they could require additional over one parking spot.
They could.
Because you could have potentially 4 drivers. I mean, you could have 2 adult children and, mom and dad who each have cars.
Yep. Zoning board has
So they
the
have that
discretion.
right.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
I would just like to know, is this gentleman here recording this for WestfordCAT and okay, that's all, so other people will be able to watch it later? That's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
If you have a protected and a local ADU, and you sell off the 2, are they somehow tied through the deeds to remain ADUs to that primary, or does it kind of then convert to a condominiumized lot?
I'll start and Joe will chime in. So for the local ADU, there is a special permit associated with that, and that will be of record, recorded at the Registry of Deeds, tied to that property. At this point in time, there's no requirement, to my knowledge, that we can require a recording at the registry for a protected use ADU. I certainly could be mistaken, but I don't believe there is any such requirement. It's just really going through the building permit process. But rest assured, there would be documentation in the building file, and there would be documentation in the zoning file, certainly when it came to the local ADU. So that is a question for a protected use ADU. It should be in the building file, but I don't know where else there would be a requirement for that. There would be some related documentation undoubtedly in the health department because that has, as she mentioned, separate requirements. So I think it would be there, but I'm not sure it would always be of record at the registry for the protected use. And I don't know if that actually answered your question.
It does a little bit, but so you could buy something not knowing, unless they contacted building or Board of Health, that it's an ADU. You could kind of be under the impression that it's a standalone, separate.
Well, when they apply for an ADU, the building permit, if they did a building permit search, they'd be able to determine that it was an ADU.
Are there any instances when an ADU would not become an ADU any longer?
It's too new.
Thank you.
Hi, Tom Pritchard here. If you're going to build like a detached ADU, how far away does it have to be, like from the house or property lines, to even consider doing this? Like if your property, if you need 30 feet, but you only have 25 feet, why bother?
Well, it depends. Depends on what district you're in, either RA, RB, or whatever the case may be. And also, section 3.65 of our bylaw could kick in. It's not a cut and dry answer. It would be a case-by-case basis.
But there are defined.
Yes, there are
who you
setbacks.
are,
Yes, there are
defined
setbacks.
distances that they have to be.
I'm sorry, say that again?
So there are, depending on who you are, there is a defined distance that you have to be like from a property line.
Yes, there are setbacks, correct. Yes.
Hey guys, thanks for having this. Jim Zegowitz, and I'll piggyback, I have a couple of questions. I'll piggyback on this last one. With regards to the setback requirements, and I've been doing a lot of these things, and in some municipalities, they have different setback requirements for an accessory structure versus a primary structure. How are we defining separated ADU? If it's not attached to the building, are we defining that as an accessory structure or a primary residence?
It would be an accessory structure.
It would be, okay.
Yes.
And just,
As long, because you have your principal dwelling, so
Yeah.
that would be the principal, and then that would be considered an accessory.
okay, so
Uh,
in Westford, do we have different
No, we do not.
setback? Okay.
It would be
for-
the same setback as if it was a primary structure.
Okay, got it, thank you. Excellent, okay. And so, height restrictions, building size, things like that would all be with regards to an accessory use building? We
Yes.
Never get to the 35 feet or whatever, right? How about the common entry? How do you, how would you deal with the square footage inside a vestibule, an 8x10 common entry? Does that go on the ADU, or does that go on?
That would go on the ADU, yes.
And what else do they have here? Sort of, and then, so if you have a two-family and you want to stick one of these things, or two of these things out the side of the building, how are we dealing with the sprinkler code in that case? Where now all of a sudden we go from a two-family to, are we looking at a three-family?
Is it
I've got
attached?
messages on that, yeah.
Then, yeah, you would fall under the sprinkler code, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, very good, thank you. I've got mixed messages on that in different communities, and I don't understand why. It seems pretty cut and dry to me.
767-71, I gotta be honest with you, it was written by, under chapter 48. It wasn't very well written. You're gonna get answers from me in this community. You go to Littleton, it could be completely different. Townsend, completely different. It's so interpretated based. I just really wish they'd let the people that should be writing it write it, but I'm gonna leave it at that. But that's why it's so
Amen to that.
interpretated based.
It
Yeah.
seems like every municipality has something like that. And I really do appreciate that, Eric.
And in fact, even with the way they write the separate entrance, that's based on basically a basement ADU. They're not talking about detached or even attached for that matter. It's really summed up. I mean, the corridor. If you have a detached, how does the corridor fit into a detached? I mean, in fact, myself and my assistant building commissioner, Tuesdays we work late, so we try to get at least an hour in a building code. So if somebody calls, we're speaking the same language. And we were just discussing this last Tuesday, and just trying to figure it out amongst him and myself. Just so that, again, we're giving the right answers, the same answers to the community.
Okay, and then some other things, my questions were fire separation. Are we gonna, go from a 1 to a 2, or we just go for 5/8?
That's another area. I mean, it hasn't been touched. In fact, I just had a discussion with a friend of mine who's the building commissioner in Waltham. And he's like, oh yeah, you need it. I'm like, well, wait a second. I'll bring up the Ernie Bach Jr. If you have a finished basement with bedrooms, okay, but a bulkhead, they don't have any other way of getting out. This was the conversation we had, and you put a kitchen in there. Now do we have to have a fire separation? And he was kind of like, wow, I never really thought of it that way. I've been to a lot of the continuing education, and you'll talk to 10 inspectors, and you'll get 10 different answers. in my opinion, no, you do not need a fire separation. That's my opinion.
Okay. What else did I have in there? Oh, and then the, two more, common utilities and energy code. But how are you gonna address the energy code when you're attaching a 900, say a 600 square feet?
I've heard that all ADUs need to have a HERS rating completed. I wouldn't write that yet though. However, I have not seen it anywhere in writing. I take the philosophy, if it's not in writing, it does not exist. I am not gonna listen to somebody from the Department of Energy say, yes, you have to do you have to get a HERS rating on a basement, okay? Because the protected ADU is only up to 900 square feet. Once the energy code states once you're over 1,000 square feet, then you have to have a HERS rating, whether you're adding 1,000 square feet or you're finishing, like a basement or an attic, 1,000 square feet, you have to have a HERS rating on the entire building. So until I see it in writing, an attached ADU, no HERS rating. A detached, however, would need a HERS rating.
Okay, and then so the same would apply to continuous insulation on the exterior, things like that?
Well, it would just have to meet the 42, whatever the case may be, yes.
Okay, whatever energy code we're under, right? And I guess the last one was, what was the last one? Oh, common utilities. So you're making so you're creating another, put an ADU on existing single family, have a common entrance. I've had in some municipalities say, okay, now you need completely separate utilities and you need a third for the common entrance.
Okay.
Particularly with power.
71.03, it talks about utilities. Unfortunately, I don't have a slide on that. It's based on, from the best of my knowledge, but I can, if you give me your information, I can send that over to you. Or you can even just type in 780 CMR 671 and look at 71.33, 71.033. And it talks about utilities.
Got it. Very good, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, guys. And ladies.
Well, perhaps we've worn out our welcome. No new questions. That's good. We're at the hour. So does anyone have any last questions or? No? Well, I just want to thank everyone for attending and asking some good and thoughtful questions. And thanks to the panelists here and to the Cameron Senior Center for hosting. So I hope everyone had a good time. You can certainly email with any follow-up questions. We'll be happy to try to answer them. We already have a short list that we got to work on for you. So. Thank you. Yes, sir. Thank you.